'Cause like a winter tonight, I thought I would always have light. The quick flash that you gave to me, so dark I could barely see. Looking
From around the world, wherever you are, we welcome you and thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about addictions with Dr. Sacco. Dr. Sacco is an international lecturer and best-selling author. He's written over 30 books. That's right, 30 books. And his most recent one is called Why Keeping Resolutions Are So Ridiculously Difficult. I completely agree. Welcome to the circle, Dr. Sacco.
Thanks for having me so much, Carl, and everybody turning in. Thank you for tuning in and checking me out today.
This is going to be really fascinating. January, everybody knows, New Year's, people make hundreds of resolutions, thousands all over the world, and they keep maybe one. So why is it so difficult for us to do this?
You know what, Carlos? I think it boils down to, I guess, a few things. First of all, most people make unrealistic resolutions, I think, in terms of, they go in with it all or nothing. And when I'm saying unrealistic, if they don't succeed at it within, day one or two, they throw it out like the baby in the bathwater, so to speak. So they'll say, you know what, it didn't work again. Plus, Valentine's Day's coming, Easter's coming, all these other holidays are coming up. Especially if they're trying to give up, they want to lose weight, they want to give up junk foods and that stuff. They'll say, well, we'll wait till the complete holiday season's out of the way, then we'll start again. Second thing that happens a lot, Carlos, is people make resolutions because they think they're expected to make resolutions. It's the thing to do. It's passé. You see it in all the media. You read about it in newspapers. And other people are doing it, so they want to kind of keep up with the Joneses. And I think number three that oftentimes happens, which is probably the worst thing somebody can do for themselves, is create resolutions that are based on other people's expectations. So your spouse says, you know what, I think it'd be really great if you'd give up smoking for the new year, or you'd give up drinking, eating, you start eating right, doing more stuff. At that point there, Carlos, a lot of people feel burdened. It's like, hey, why the heck am I doing this? This isn't my idea. And now I'm feeling that I have to perform here and I don't want to do it. So there's no incentive. So the bottom line is, at the end of the day, a resolution, a change, overcoming an addiction or a bad habit is only going to work if there's an intrinsic motivator, meaning it's coming from within and you want to do it for you. If it's an extrinsic motivator, meaning it's being forced on you, mandated on you, it's less likely to work.
That's very fascinating. Actually, we're going to explore a little bit more towards the end of how we can overcome these addictions. I'm going to go, maybe I should have started off with this, but how do we define addiction?
You know what? Having taught addictions in the addiction studies program at a university for the last, since 1998, that makes it almost 17 years now, and working out in the field and writing many books and articles on addictions, there is no one clear-cut specific definition I like to use. It really is a culmination of parts. I like to say that an addiction is a habit that turned into a necessity because your mind or your conscious mind has now convinced your unconscious mind that you need to have this all the time. Add to that, it's becoming physiologically addictive, like alcohol, that your body now needs to have it. It's built up a tolerance to it, and it's used to having it in the bloodstream. So you have a physical tolerance to it. An addiction possesses, or a psychological tolerance, or you want to call it a mental tolerance to it. It also provides instant gratification. It relieves pain or stress. You take it. And then I think the paramount thing, which is really important with addiction, is you have tried repeated times to quit on your own. You've even had outside help, and each time you failed. When it's come to that, Carlos, that's when you know you have an addiction. You can't go without, you can't do without, and most importantly, you can't quit on your own unless there's some sort of intervention or outside source outside of you that can actually help you quit.
So when physiologically it overtakes you, you have to get outside help.
Absolutely. It's kind of funny because there's different theories when you look at addictions, and one of them is kind of an interesting one, which is called the spiritual theory of addiction, or a spiritual addiction, which basically, it's the spiritual premise which says you get infiltrated by a spirit, almost like a demonic possession, so to speak. But what is another name for alcohol and liqueurs? Spirits. And literally you get possessed by the spirit, and you need to have the hair of the dog in you and courage in a bottle. So this then becomes basically what I see with many people with addictions is they have what are called addictive personalities. So they have some sort of dysfunctional upbringing, some sort of characterological defect within themselves that they believe that they can compensate, overcome, or if you want to call modify their lives, or even better still, cope with existing stresses in their life, usually distressors, and this is their way of dealing with things and overcoming things. But obviously, you're putting a dysfunctional band-aid on a dysfunctional problem.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to take a couple looks at addiction from different angles. First, I'll look at the evolutionary psychology view. Are we predisposed?
Oh, that's a good question, Carlos. That's like one that hit me between the eyes. People will tell you, and it's really an interesting one. It's almost like what you guys have in the States. Me being a Canadian, I can say this. I teach in the States and work in the States as well. You have the Republicans and the Democrats. You're either all for Democrats or all for Republicans. There's no Whig party, so to speak. So when you're looking at addictions this way, most people, interestingly enough, that are more prone to having addictions or they have the addiction, more of them are inclined to believe, assert, or even buy into the premise that it's a biological cause. It's physiologically innate within them, that there's some sort of gene that makes them more prone to it. Then if you take the flip side of it, the other side of the other believers, they'll say, no, it's choice. You had a free will to go and try this, whatever it is, your substance, and you got hooked on it. And then there's those that'll say, like myself, I believe in an eclectic approach, eclecticism, which says it's biopsychosocial spiritual, meaning there's a biological cause. You probably potentially do have maybe a physical predisposition towards it, but once you've used it, you've altered your brain chemistry, you've altered your hormones, which now you enjoy taking it or using it. You have a psychological possible defect, could be cognitive distortions, cognitive dysfunctions that where you feel that you need to take something or do something to either provide you amusement, pleasure, or overcompensate some sort of psychological pain, whether it be some sort of depression that's non-clinical. Then there's the social phenomenon that some people become addicted to something because of the social environments. A big one is this gambling. And there's a really big concern in this where we've had concerns about schools, high schools that have after school poker clubs, because the concern here is this going to be the next wave of potential gambling addicts? But yet they're getting together and they're socializing, and socializing is creating a conditioned response, which could potentially lead to the addiction. And then, as I said, there's the spiritual component, which we've talked about it. The spirit itself, it does something for your spirit. There's something within you. And it could have even been religiosity, some sort of belief system where you were brought up in a very rigid environment. There could have been psychological or religious abuse done to the person. And this has happened in many cults, different types of cults where there's been abuse. And one way that the members do cope with it at the end of the day, or in religious fundamental homes, is they drink or they drug to hide their shame, feelings of guilt, or to overcome the abuse that's happened to them. So I like to take that approach, Carlos, where it's biopsychosocial spiritual. And I think when you look at addiction that way, it's better, because I believe in differential diagnosis. You don't treat two people the same way, when I'm saying treating the same way, when you're looking at how they're going to go about overcoming their addiction, especially if they have a dual disorder or a concurrent disorder, which means they have a mental health problem plus an addiction. And then don't even get me started on the whole other stuff, because if you're saying it's strictly biological, then how do you explain pornography? Because pornography, gambling, there's not a gene in us for pornography, because it never existed per se until the media brought it to life. However, some people, and I talked about this in a book I wrote with Dr. Deborah Leno, who's a sex therapist in New York. We wrote a book called The Madonna Complex, and these are men that are addicted to pornography, that ironically, some people back in the ancient times would look at art, famous arts where there's nude art. That was their porn, some people would assert. So at the end of the day, it's your perception, why you're using something, what is it doing to you, and most importantly, can you stop doing it on your own? Because if you can't stop and it's interfering with your work, your family life, your social life, and it becomes extremely stressing. If you're not engaging in that act, then you know you have an addiction.
I like that approach a lot. The biopsychosocial spiritual approach is a good one. It's a really comprehensive view. One of the big things we stand for here on the circle is to get a better understanding of ourselves and the world. We need a more comprehensive view of human behavior. Completely agree. On the addictions, do you see any variations, any differences between cultures or genders, per se? Maybe things you struggle more with or things they're addicted to?
Interestingly, you know what, Carlos, what we're seeing now, predominantly in the past, men used to be more addicted to alcoholism. Like alcohol was more of a guy thing because guys would be the ones going out drinking. It was, socially expected. You go out with the guys. I remember seeing it on, shows like Bonanza. The Cartwrights go there and they get a glass of milk. It's on the counter. Walk into a Clint Eastwood bar and you ask for a glass of milk and you're sitting next to him, you're going to get a slap. But, it was almost expected. You go out with guys, you're going to have a drink. That's more of a guy phenomenon. That used to be. But it's balanced out now because there's more working women. There's affirmative action. So more women are now out in the that were once predominantly male societal careers. Women are now drinking more. Whereas in the past, pharmaceutical drugs like sleeping aids, and antidepressants, stuff like that, women used to be more kind of addicted to that because they were more prone to go out and get psychological help by going to psychiatrists and or self-medicating that way. Interestingly today, this is without a word of a lie, and it's a concern, and I've talked about this on a lot of shows. The number one addiction right now, bar none, and it's definitely more of a male phenomenon, is pornography addiction. Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, because if you think about this, I believe there was something, oh gosh, and this was last year, I was on a fellow show, and we were talking about it. There was well over 100 million web pages devoted just to pornography sites. So it's probably gone up, and it constantly exponentially increases because more material's added. You know how the internet works. More information is being put into the highway of information, so to speak. And if you think about this before, if you had a pornography addiction back in the day, you had to go to one of those theaters and go watch it on a big screen. So you go sneak in. And you had to be basically, for all intents and purposes, especially if you're a married guy, more discreet, just like going to strip clubs. And it used to be the thing that you couldn't do certain things in a strip club. But today they're more liberal. Just like then pornography became VHS tapes and beta tapes. So you had to go rent them in the store, so you had to be discreet getting it out, so to speak. So it was still not a high prevalence with it because you wanted to try to hide it. And when I say hide it, from your spouse. Because a lot of men that have these addictions, their wives or their girlfriends have no idea they're doing this. So then, lo and behold, you can then start downloading it right on your big desktop computer or your laptop. Laptop was a lot easier, so then you can go do it discreetly, hide it. And the thing that really, I think, has gotten more disturbing over the last little while, probably the last 2 years with iPads, Blackberries, iPhones, you name it, Google Pads, is that now you can take it in the palm of your hand, pun intended, so to speak, and you take this everywhere with you. And a lot of guys are doing this, sitting in their cars watching pornography, doing it while they're at work in their office. You think, oh, look, Pete's just sending a text off right now. Is he really? And unfortunately, there's a lot of addictions to pornography. And it's actually, I can't even fathom what the rates are on it. But just looking at it, I saw some studies that looked into this, and many women had reported pornography addictions is one of the reasons why there's the dissolution of their family, like the marriage, why it fell apart. Yeah. And one other one that's really interesting, and for anybody that goes on my website, petersacco.com, you can find a book that I wrote called Technological Rage, which is a free ebook, free download. And one of the ones, Carlos, we found is the fastest growing one is texting addictions. When we were putting the book together, we had teenagers and kids anywhere monthly texting from 10,000 to 30,000 texts a month.
A month? Wow.
A month. Grades have gone down because of this. It's just, we've seen correlations to it, and I talk about it in the book, to road rage, where people now, it's gotten so bad that they have to pass laws that there's no texting and driving. Just like no drinking and driving, texting and driving is actually worse than drinking and driving, because and I've spoken to police that I've worked with, they said, you know what, a person who's drinking and driving will at least try extra hard be extra vigilant to focus on the road because they don't want to get caught, and they're going to be more cautious. Whereas somebody who's into texting and driving, they're more likely to look down because they have this confidence. Well, I'm a good driver, I can text and drive. More teenagers and young kids or young adults are being killed in car accidents. It's unfortunate because it's related to texting and driving.
That's, oh my gosh. Yeah, you know what? There's one of the questions I wanted to explore, but I think we're going to wait to part 2. I wanted to explore some of the physiological effects, the negative effects, physiologically and psychologically, that you're seeing. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and provide some of the solutions that you've come up with on how to help people overcome these addictions. And if we still have time, we're going to explore the amount of books that you have. We're going to explore some of these very interesting topics. I think one of them that stood out in my mind was why women want what they can't have. So we'll look at all that. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Sacco. If people want to get a hold of you, I know they want to, where do they go?
You can get me many ways. You can go right to my website, petersacco.com. That's petersacco.com. Also, I have another website which focuses primarily right on addictions. It's a book based on Right Now, Enough is Enough, which is my book that's coming out again. It's being re-released, which focuses on addiction. So the website is rightnowenoughисenough.com. And you can find me on Facebook, Peter Sacco, and you can find me on Twitter, Peter Sacco.
I think Dr. Sacco right now, as we're doing the show, is writing another book.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
Part 1, we talked about addiction, a lot of sorts of different addictions. This one we're going to try to do is find out what are the negative psychological and physiological effects of addiction. I want to see if we can find out what kind of physiological and psychological effects do we get negatively from pornography.
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm glad you asked it, because a lot of people say, well, it's just entertainment. And I'd like to say, no, it's not just entertainment, because entertainment is something you do in moderation, and it's also something that you do not do out of necessity. And I've always qualified this by saying anything can become addictive. There's, you could even have a good addiction. You might accuse me of being addicted to reading and writing, but I'll gladly accept that addiction any day of the week, and working out. These are things that I like, but they don't interfere in my life. It keeps me as a productive person. The problem is with something like pornography is if you are married already, it's not a good thing, because you're fantasizing about other women. You're fantasizing about other sexual experiences that you're not having. So some people say, well, big deal, Pete. You're actually diversifying, you're going to the ice cream parlor and getting a different flavor, so to speak, and it's only fantasy. It's not hurting anything. But the problem with this is, and Deb Lehman, Dr. Deb Lehman, who was a sex therapist, and I wrote about this in depth in our book, The Madonna Complex, Why Men Are Wired to Cheat. And it's not that only men cheat. Women do cheat as well, too. I'll point that out there. But we went with Why Men Are Wired to Cheat because the book is primarily based on pornography. And since more men use pornography, infinitely more men than women, and get addicted to it, they have a greater propensity to cause dysfunction within their marriages or relationships because of the pornography. And a couple things do happen when you watch too much pornography. The most obvious one is if you're watching this, and I don't want to be crude or rude here, but you're probably getting off. You're indulging, and if you're getting off that way, sexually arousing yourself and take caring of your own sexual needs that way, you're basically used up. You don't want to have sex with your spouse or your relations because you've already engaged in it. And plus, what it also does too is you're becoming conditioned to being sexually aroused in a certain way on your terms, which you also have the fantasies of the women in the videos. So I've had women say this to me all the time. It's like, my gosh, Pete, my boyfriend or my husband's addicted to pornography, watching these women or going to the strip clubs to get off, aroused by these types of women. And she's like, look at me. I've had 2 or 3 kids. I'm 40 years old. How can I compete with those women in that? And the key thing is, it's acting. It's a facade. It's an illusion. But the guy watching it, if you watch it repetitiously, 21 to 28 days, that's normally how long an addiction takes, or a bad habit, good or bad habit, and you're doing it that way, you start to be conditioned, and that's what's going to arouse you, and that's what's going to get you, basically get you to where you want to be in terms of sexually aroused and satisfied. And another thing, I think, Carlos, and I'll just put this out there, it degrades a lot of people, a lot of men that become addicted to pornography develop what is called misogyny, which is an old kind of term based on, if you look at Greek philosophy, people like Aristotle, that basically looked at it and said, hey, if you're looking at a woman that way, you're looking at her as a second-class citizen, you're looking at her as a sex object, and that's what misogyny is. It's a sex object. So you're objectifying a woman rather than looking at her as somebody's daughter, somebody's wife, somebody's mother. And I've always said this to guys, what if that was your daughter that somebody else was watching in pornography and all that stuff? How would you feel about it? Or your mother, for that matter. And it's like, oh gosh, that'd just be wrong. So, and I think that's part of it. And when Deb and I were working with clients talking about this, that's part of the introspection of overcoming a pornography addiction, besides abstaining from it, cutting it altogether, is reframing your thought patterns towards pornography, more so women, or who it is that you're getting aroused by, and looking at them and seeing them as a human being rather than an object.
So it seems to me we can also change our perception of our wife while watching too much pornography, not only in a sexual sense, but maybe even in a relational sense, it might change.
You know what? And it's the flip side, and we talked about this in our book, The Madonna Complex. We looked at the actual aspect of Marianismo. Marianismo is based on the Madonna. That's where, the Madonna Complex, which is based on the Blessed Virgin, the Mother. And that is how some men will look at their wives. That two purposes. First of all, the sexual relations are fine and dandy as long as we're dating. But once we get married, her job is to procreate and we're to have a child. And then once we've had the child, she's done her duties. She's a mother now, and I couldn't possibly have the mother of my kids do dirty sexual acts with me and engage in these types of things. Therefore, these men, Carlos, feel justified by going to mistresses, going to strip clubs, watching pornography, because they'll say, my wife is the virtuous one. I've got to keep her image clean. I've got to make sure she's pure for my children. And it's okay then to do this other stuff with another woman because she means nothing to me. And that's a really bad approach, how some men think that way. And
it's an amazing level of altruism, I guess.
Yes, because they're actually looking at it, and it's interesting. And some men will say, if they went, and there's some famous cases of this where they got caught with their hands in the cookie jar, and they'll say, well, it wasn't sex because it wasn't intercourse, it was just a massage, or, it wasn't really sex because we never fornicated or consummated it by engaging in the act of procreation. And some men who buy into the Marianismo approach will actually say that, believe that, as well as the misogyny approach. They'll say, hey, that's not my wife. I don't have feelings for this woman. They're an escort. They serve a purpose because they're providing a service that I'm not getting at home. So I'm not really cheating. I'm just paying for a service, and there's no love involved. It's just an act. And that's how they will legitimize it, unfortunately. But if you're the person on the other side of the coin and, that's being done to you, you're not going to feel very good about it. You can tell somebody, well, hey, it wasn't real. It was just sex. And you see, here's the difference. Where men, that engage in this, but now more so. More women are getting into this as well too, because we're seeing a shift in the pendulum where more women are getting involved in enjoying pornography and having these liaisons and these affairs. They'll say it's the same thing. I'm not getting sex at home, therefore I'm having sex outside of my relationship or whatever it is, and I don't consider that cheating because I'm not getting it at home, or I'm doing it to protect or secure the sanctity of my marriage or my relationship, which is really, if you look at it all in all, it's a dysfunctional way of thinking.
Yeah, it reminds me of my favorite saying, we're not really rational beings, we're just rationalizers. Before we get to how do we overcome addiction, let me explore this a little bit. Now, you were talking about texting. Does that have a different physiological or psychological effect on us? Negatively?
Absolutely. In fact, more research is now showing that gamblers, people that have problematic gambling issues or they're a compulsive gambler, possess what is called a gambler's brain, which goes on chance. You get aroused. Generally, this happens, you spin a roulette wheel as the ball's, the wheel spinning, you're waiting to see where the ball lands. Or you're playing, one-eyed bandit. You're pulling the machines and that stuff. And now you push the button. Well, as the thing is turning in either situation, that's your greatest arousal point because there's this anticipation. It's building and building and building because you can't wait to see if I'm going to win, I'm going to win, I'm going to win. Well, they've shown that in these individuals that have compulsive gambling problems, they possess what's called a gambler's brain, which is based on chance, risk, and also anticipation. This arousal. Well, this is now being shown that this exists in texters that are addicted to texting because they just can't wait to see, do I got a text? Do I got a text? Every time they hear that button, or the bell go off on their phone, it's like Pavlov and the dog. Oh my God, I'm salivating. I got me a text. I can't wait to respond and see. And I talk about this in my book, Technological Rage, the free ebook on my website, that back in the day, Carlos, people would see a yellow light when they come to an intersection and they blow right through it. They fly through it. Yellow means go fast. And then red means stop, unfortunately. And that's absolutely wrong. Yellow does mean stop, not just slow down, it means stop. People just whip through them. But, I worked with a fair bit of cops and they're telling me, what, Pete, it's really interesting. And I see this myself at intersections. People see the yellow light and it's like, oh, good. Now I can stop and look at my phone and see if I got a text or I can quickly send one off at the intersection. And it really is that kind of gambler's brain mentality that in the back of the brain, the person that texts a lot has this anticipation. Did I get a text? I can't wait to send a text. And I need to keep the drama of the texting going continuously throughout the day. And how it becomes addictive is it starts to interfere with your daily lives, i.e. work, i.e. school. So your grades drop, your work performance is going down. It disrupts the social interaction of a family, like for crying out loud. I was sitting in a restaurant not too long ago. Got a whole bunch of family in there. I'm not kidding you. The parents were in there too. Everybody's on their phones at the dinner table at a restaurant. I'm like, gee, happy times. And so that's what I mean. That's how you know when you're looking at this, that there's some sort of interference which is leading to familial, social, and personal dysfunction.
Quickly here, we have a few minutes left, but I definitely want to get to the solutions. But before that, I want to answer this question if we can. You were talking about the physiological effects in the brain. They're similar, I've heard, to drugs, to getting a high off of cocaine or heroin. So there's an increased production of serotonin and dopamine. But then the half-life, there's an issue with the half-life that keeps these guys coming back to get more and more. Is that true?
Yeah, especially with drugs like methamphetamine, crystal meth, and definitely crack. Those are two of the worst drugs known to humanity on the face of this earth. They're highly addictive. Research has shown if you try something like methamphetamine or crack 5 times, it absolutely depletes the dopamine receptor cells in your brain. And the way I always explain this to students, I explain it to colleagues or those who want to listen to me, is it's like you have a giant basin where you have drains. And so each time there's a flood, let's say, it floods, the overflow goes into your basin, and then the water dissipates through the pipes out of each drain. Well, if these pipes start to then clog up, your water is not going to go down. It's going to just go back up, and then your floor is all flood out. Well, the problem is with this is when you use methamphetamine, crystal meth, or crack, research has shown you can use it in as little as 5 times. In some, it's less. That what it does is it wipes out these dopamine receptor cells in your brain, which are the drains, and that's for your dopamine to go down. And when you have too much dopamine, as you know, it causes depression. So what's happening then, Carlos, is, you get the quick fix, the natural, this unnatural high from your, the smack you're taking, whether it's methamphetamine or crack. But then, as you said, as it starts to wear off, you're crashing. You got all this dopamine. And so what it then starts to do is mimics bipolar depression or manic depression. So you now need the drug to give you your highs, which you become climatized to, which you enjoy. So it's like, wow, I love this euphoria, but then when you come crashing down, man, you really bottom out. So that's where you've got to go, re-engage the cycle, so to speak. So that's why that's a really bad cycle. And interestingly enough, gambling, as you alluded to, it does change receptor, the neurotransmitters, the composite within the brain. Even depression, thoughts, if you have negative thoughts, they will make you depressed. So our ability, if you look at neuropsychoimmunology, which is the mind's ability to influence the body through psychosomatics, you can actually change your brain chemistry just by your thoughts. So the same thing happens with gambling. The anticipation creates arousal, gets the endorphins going and everything. And a lot of people feel really burnt out after playing slot machines or playing a game of poker.
Wow. Scary stuff. All right, Dr. Sacco, here comes Carlos. He's coming to your office. I need help. I can't stop eating brownies. What do I do? How do I get over this addiction? What was the first thing Dr. Sacco would do to help me out?
The very first thing that anybody like myself or practitioner would do, Carlos, is to basically do a case on you. And I'm not saying like a case study, case management. We need to find out exactly what it is that you're using, how long you've used it for, what is the frequency of your use. Also, if you're prone to mood disorders, are you a person that has depression? Were you depressed and did you start drinking? And that's why you started drinking, or did you start drinking and then you became depressed? So what's really paramount, Carlos, is the very first thing that you have to do within this case assessment is to find out, does the individual have a concurrent disorder? Which means, do they have a mental health disorder plus an addiction? That's one of the first things that we need to find out. Also, by finding out immediately, we need to know, is the drug in your system? If there's a drug in your system, obviously something as bad as heroin and even alcohol in some respects, we have to get the individual into a detox program. Got to get the drug out of the person's system to get them functioning well, not only so that they can function cognizantly, they can make proper decisions as well as perceive and understand what is being said to them and have a rational discussion. So it's a good communication. But also, we also have to make sure this person isn't poisoned, that this person does not have physiological symptoms because of their abuse. Potentially, the person, we would encourage a physical examination, possibly even a CAT scan, blood tests, to make sure that if the person has been a chronic alcoholic, a binge drinker for many, many, many years, and they've already said, hey, I'm having memory issues, you'd have to engage and look into the fact, do they potentially have any form of organ damage with their kidneys, especially their liver? Do they have cirrhosis of the liver? Because if they have that, potentially they have Korsakoff's disease, which is the blood is not being pure that's going to the brain, or whether because the liver's not working properly, alcohol is going to the brain and basically bathing the brain in alcohol. So we would want to look at these 3 criteria and make sure, A, the person is not currently using so badly that they're incoherent or their health is at risk, so we'd want to get them detoxed. Second, make sure that if they're cognizant and they're coherent and they're not overly using, that they can engage in some sort of treatment protocol now, that they don't have to go into detox, rather they can go in a 30-day or 60-day program. We want to discern whether they have a concurrent disorder. And as I said, the third thing is if they really do have a serious issue, physical issue, they've got to get that tended to first.
That's a fantastic plan. Dr. Sacco, I know a lot of people now want to get a hold of you. Where do we go?
The best place to get a hold of me, Carlos, and anybody out there is go right to my website, petersacco.com, petersacco.com. I have free books for you. You can read, you can check them out on addictions and relationship issues, anything like that you want to better yourself with. You can go to my other website, right now, enoughisenough.com, where I also have some free stuff there you can check out on addictions, just generally addictions and anger management problems. And you can find me on Facebook, Peter Sacco, and you can also find me on Twitter, Peter Sacco.
And the last thing before I forget, you have a book coming out next year?
Yes, we have a really cool book that I've actually done, and I'm really proud of. I'm doing it with Debbie Williams. It's called If I Was a Bird, What Kind of Flock Would I Fly With? And it's for kids. It's predominantly for kids because kids are at different levels now in their reading skills and their comprehension. So it's anywhere from a child who's 6 all the way up to 10. Even adults can read this with their kids. It looks at kids, how they can help prevent bullying in schools, be more cognizant and more accepting of cultural, religious, and spiritual diversities, and definitely building self-esteem amongst themselves and fitting in.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Sacco, for being on the circle. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did. We learned a lot about addictions. drpetersacco.com. Don't forget about that. Once again, our motto is simple. Wherever there's psychology involved, we are there. We'll see you next time.